Welcome to the PVN College podcast, where our goal is to grow students in the love and knowledge of Jesus Christ. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the Enneagram, why it can be helpful, and what to watch out for. Our guest today is Anna Wilfong. Anna is a graduate of Shorter University with degrees in psychology and music. She is currently pursuing her master's degree in occupational therapy at Brunel University. And she has been using the Enneagram for nearly 2 years, her words. Anna, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing well, Anna. Thank you for asking. Most guests don't ask me how I'm doing, so that means a lot. There's that occupational therapy thing kind of coming through, I think. You have to be honest with me. Can I ask you a deep, personal, philosophical question before we start? You haven't prepped for this at all.
No.
Did you struggle spelling Brunel like I do? Do you struggle with that deeply?
Sometimes. When I'm typing it, yes. Yeah. Sometimes I spell it, is it like Breanu? And so me and my roommates have this running joke of like Brianu, like Keanu Reeves, but Brianu Reeves. I don't know. That's just kind of a running joke that we have.
Oh, very nice, very nice, very nice. So you're currently pursuing your master's degree in occupational therapy, and you graduated with 2 degrees. So did you double major at Shorter?
Yes. Well, kind of, yes. So I got a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and a Bachelor of Arts in Music. So it's a double degree, details. But I decided to add the second degree program of music. I think it was my sophomore year. Yeah. Just because I love music so much and it has been super impactful in my life, and scholarships. That was also a perk. So,
yes.
But,
Again, this isn't what we're talking about today. Any quick word of advice to students who are currently doing double majors or double degrees right now? Something that might have helped you or didn't help you. There's also things not to do is good advice.
Right. It's very difficult to not have your nose in a book all the time.
Yeah.
It's a lot of extra work. So I think still prioritizing time with your friends, time for a social life. Honestly, I think that's the biggest thing that I struggle with is I was studying so much. So still making sure that you spend time with your friends and things like that.
Yeah. Good advice.
Yeah.
Wise words for whether you're just doing 1 major or 2. Good stuff, Anna. But today, though that might be another podcast, today we're not talking specifically about double majoring, but we might be talking about things, how a double major might be a symptom of something or a sign of something else. Today, we are going to talk about the Enneagram. And Anna, I think your generation, those in college or just out of college, that's what I mean by, you kids these days. But your generation, and even to a degree, I think my generation, they have a pretty deep knowledge of the Enneagram. But for a lot of people, myself included, I think we know of the Enneagram. Like people have heard of the Enneagram. But that's about it. That's about the extent, is just they know it exists. They've seen kind of the weird circle with the star in the middle. And I will say, I wish there was a different logo. Not that that's the logo for it. I'm sure you're about to take me to school on this. It looks kind of scary. Like I could see how old people would be like, oh, it's satanic because it looks like the weird symbol. But obviously it's not that, and there's more to it than that, which is why you, our resident expert, are here.
I would call myself an enthusiast, not an expert.
Okay. Good to know. I've done a little homework on it, but I'd love to hear from someone who has used the Enneagram, who has benefited from the Enneagram, which a lot of people have. Like, this thing is no joke. Like, this isn't just something that I feel like maybe when it started or maybe when it first resurged into popularity, a lot of people in my generation up were like, oh, great, another personality test. It'll be here today, gone tomorrow. But it's not. The Enneagram, at least for now, is here to stay. And so I think the more we know about it, the better equipped the church can be to embrace certain aspects of it and maybe be cautious about certain aspects of it. So anyway, enough from me. Anna, fill us in. First kind of question, broad question, what is the Enneagram?
Okay, so the Enneagram essentially is the symbol, but that's not the purpose. So what it is and I guess the purpose are kind of two different things. So the Enneagram essentially is with Ennea meaning 9 and gram meaning diagram. It's a map for self-discovery and personal growth. And so a lot of the aspects are explained through the symbol. So I think as long as you find one that's helpful, maybe from like a credible source, it can help explain a little bit better how it works and help guide you through all the different lines and the arrows and the numbers and everything that can be kind of intimidating. But basically, how it works is you take a personality assessment. So you can find some of these at different websites for free. Some of them you can pay for. And it's going to give you or place you in a specific type, which is also interchangeable with number. And so you can be either numbers 1 through 9. And so, hang on just a sec.
Mm-hmm. I've already learned like so much more than I thought. I knew. I didn't know. For example, like, I hope I'm not distracting you while you're collecting your thoughts.
Oh,
but like,
no, you're good.
Like, I had no idea that Enneagram, like the Ennea stood for or is 9, which corresponds to the symbol. I just called it the logo, by the way.
Right, right.
But that corresponds. So a type. So which type you are mirrors a number 1 through 9. So there are 9 types. Is that right?
Yes. And so really quick, I can just go through like the names that are associated with each of the types. That might be helpful. So type 1, you have the perfectionist. Type 2, you have the helper. Type 3, you have the performer. Type 4 is the romantic. 5 is the investigator. 6 is the loyalist. 7 is the enthusiast. 8 is the challenger. And 9 is the peacemaker. And so basically what each of these numbers means, it's not just some, I guess, like abstract thing like, I'm this number. Like, what does that even mean? So the people that, I guess, created or came up with this idea of the Enneagram, each number has a specific list or a specific group of characteristics, behaviorally, emotionally, mentally, and those kind of play themselves out in everyday life. So while it's similar to a lot of other personality assessments like Myers-Briggs, or I'm probably throwing things out there that people might not know.
Yeah, the DISC
but like
test.
Myers-Briggs or things like that. So it's really similar in that it does place you within a specific category. And those are explained through specific behaviors. But I think what makes the Enneagram different than some of these other assessments is that there's also an aspect of spirituality to it. And rather than just placing you within a specific box, it's kind of a tool to help you climb out of that box. And what it does is it points at aspects of your behavior or your lifestyle that maybe are unhealthy and that can be affecting people around you in an unhealthy way. So it's kind of a tool of like, let's find out who I am, why I am the way that I am, and how that's affecting other people. And it's an avenue for just growth, emotional awareness, self-awareness, and just how those can impact the people around you.
No, I think that's awesome. So awareness seems to be a key. Like, and you said a journey of self-discovery, like figuring out, first step to solving a problem is admitting there is one, right? And that's part of what I think. So you're put into, if that's the right way to say that, you are assigned, it gets shown to yourself that you are a specific type. But then I know there are also, like, there are wings and arrows associated with it as well. Can you fill us in a little bit on, is that like, are those subcategories within the types? What are the wings and arrows? What's going on? And maybe give us an example. I think that would be helpful.
Yes. Okay. So one thing that I will note about the Enneagram that is a little bit different than some of the other personality assessments, there's a lot of differences, but one thing that's unique about the way it's designed, and you can even see this through the diagram, the image that represents the Enneagram, is that all of the numbers in some way, shape, or form are connected to one another. So while you may be placed within one specific type. I personally, and through the Wings and Arrows, like it's explained that you can still show characteristics of the other type. So it's not like you're put in one specific box.
Okay.
And from one of the sources, just as I've learned and researched about it, one way it was described is like going to Home Depot and looking at paint colors, right? So you might go to the red section, but you're going to have a whole lot of different shades of red. So while you may type as one specific number, that doesn't mean, okay, every type 7 is going to be exactly the same, because we all come from different backgrounds and personal experiences and things like that shape us into the people that we are. So while you may be one specific type, you're not going to be a carbon copy of everybody else that's that number. You might have some similarities, but you won't always be exactly the same. So as far as the image itself goes with the wings and the arrows, when you are placed within a type, so say like for me, I'm a type 5. So on the diagram, on either side of the 5, you have the 4 and the 6, and those are considered the wings.
Right.
So your wing is going to be one of the 2 numbers that falls on either side of you on the Enneagram image. And essentially what happens is you're going to show some characteristics of one of those wings more than the other, and that's what determines what your wing is. So for me, even though I'm a 5 and I'm between the 4 and the 6, I show some more characteristics of the 4. So I would be considered a 5-wing 4, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So okay. I thought the Home Depot example was huge. So it's like, if you said you're a 5, which type is a 5 again?
That's the investigator.
The investigator.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, let's say a 5 is a navy blue. Not all, like some shades of navy blue like have shades of like pink or a tinge of red in, while other shades of navy blue have a tinge of green or a tinge of orange in them. Like they're not, no one is exactly the same hue or color. But these other, so the wings and arrows are parts of other types that bleed over into your personality type, or that are parts of your personality type. Is that right? Does that make sense? Yes.
So you can show certain characteristics of really whatever your arrows are and whatever your wing is.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the arrows go, those are called your stress arrow and your security arrow. And each, when you look at the diagram, each number has 2 arrows, one pointing away from it and one pointing towards it. And those are connected
towards what?
Towards your number, your specific type. Yes. I know it's kind of difficult without having the image in front of us. And those are coming from or going towards another number on the diagram, right? Okay. So for me, my stress arrow that points away from my number as a 5 is a 7. So when I'm in a stressful situation or I'm experiencing some kind of pressure, I'm going to gravitate towards the negative characteristics of a 7. Okay. So how they would behave kind of in a more stressful situation or a negative environment.
Can you be specific with that, if that's not too invasive? What, to help people get a picture of that? Like
Type 5's worst nightmare. Let me talk about myself and my feelings.
So in a stressful situation, you would, as a 5, as an investigator, you would tend more to the negative or you would get pushed or pressured into the negative aspects of a 7. So what is a 7, and what are the negative aspects of a 7 that you would like be pushed into? Right.
Okay. So the 7 is the enthusiast, and ultimately their goal, or I guess their motivation in life, is to pursue happiness, to be free of pain, and just to have, I guess, a lot of different experiences that are positive. Okay. And so for me, when I'm put in a high pressure situation, I'm going to tend to gravitate away from things that are stressing me out or making me unhappy. And sometimes that can cause me to neglect or procrastinate or things like that.
Gotcha.
And I can also become, in some ways, more reserved, which doesn't sound like a 7 because, you know, a 7 is typically more outgoing. They're like trying to go experience life with people. But for me, since it's the negative characteristics, I'm going to become more, I guess, like a hermit and kind of draw away from things that cause me pain. So it's expressed differently, but the motivation of avoiding pain is the same. I don't know.
Kind
if
of
that
like an
makes
escape.
sense.
For you, it becomes, instead of like a positive pursuit, it becomes more of like an escapism kind of thing.
Yes. Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. And that would be the negative arrow. You said is it stress and security? Is that what
Yes.
you said? So your
Right.
stress arrow points towards a 7 and the negative aspects of a 7. Well, and they're not even the negative aspects of a 7, but it's the good aspects that can be taken and used in poor ways.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Right.
So that's
Yes.
the negative arrow or the stress arrow. And then what is the security arrow?
So the security arrow, when I am in a place where I feel safe and secure and like I can, in some ways, I guess, live to my full potential, I'm going to go towards the 8. That's where my away arrow goes. And the 8 is the challenger. That's kind of the more popular name given for it. But what I've seen in a lot of my friends that are type 8s is that they become, I guess, more like advocates for themselves, for other people. And they really don't show a lot of fear. They just kind of courageously pursue life. And so when I'm in a place where I feel more secure and safe, I'm going to feel like I can engage in life and engage in relationships and, you know, fulfill my responsibilities, not necessarily stress-free, but in a more secure way where I'm more confident in my abilities and in myself. Because as a type, this will actually help too. As a type 5, and each type has what's called a core fear. But as a type 5, my core fear is feeling incapable or inadequate or incompetent. So I'm not able to perform things the way that I would like to, or in a way that's, I don't know, going to make me feel dumb or stupid. So yeah, when I'm faced with a situation where it's like, okay, I'm really stressed out, I don't feel like I can conquer this thing, I'm going to run away from it because I know as I'm pursuing that thing, it's just going to make me feel incapable and incompetent. So I would rather run away from it. But if I'm coming from a place of security of, no, I can overcome this obstacle, I feel like I'm able to engage with whatever aspect of life that is, then I'm going to move more towards an 8 where I'm able to challenge those feelings. I'm able to just engage in a healthier way.
Yeah. So it's it's almost like your security arrow, at least for a 5, your security arrow sounds like it is security, but more of like a confidence arrow, encouraging you to pursue some things that you might not if you didn't feel that security.
Yes.
Okay. No, perfect. Well, this was such a helpful introduction. And so with that, I guess with knowing more about what the Enneagram is, and I mean, I can already think of several benefits, but so maybe Anna, what are 2 ways that the Enneagram is helpful? Or like if someone came up to you who hasn't done the Enneagram, and they said, why should I take this? What are maybe 2 things that you would encourage them with?
So one of the quotes that I've come across just through researching and learning more about this is a quote by Flannery O'Connor, and she says, "To know oneself is, above all, to know what one lacks. It is to measure oneself against truth and not the other way around. The first product of self-knowledge is humility." And so I think one of the reasons that it is so useful is that it's teaching you self-awareness and just giving you a perspective of emotional intelligence. It's telling you more things about yourself that you may not have realized about yourself before. And ultimately, it's going to show you how to reach a fuller potential. It's going to show you maybe some of the roadblocks in your life or things that are holding you back and help you be able to overcome those things. And then also, I think ultimately what that ends up doing is creating a greater capacity for compassion for ourselves and for other people, and allows us to extend grace in a more effective way when you realize, okay, these are aspects of myself that maybe are negative and are holding me back. I think it gives you a different kind of compassion for other people to be able to see, okay, well, these are also areas that they're struggling with. And I can find these areas within myself. And so I think it creates a greater capacity for compassion and just understanding where people are coming from and why they may be struggling with certain things in life. And then also towards ourselves, it creates a greater capacity for self-love as well.
So, it almost, and not to Christianize it, but to me, it almost sounds like, it sounds like everything else in this world. In order to utilize the Enneagram most effectively, it requires empathy, or else to me, I almost feel like it could become a source of pride. Like you could become, I think you can become prideful with how much you know yourself, which would cause you to look down on others who clearly don't know themselves as well as I know myself. And so I think that what I'm trying to say is, in order to utilize the Enneagram most effectively, it almost requires that you be a Christian, because I feel like that would enable you to, like, everyone can use the Enneagram to know themselves better, 100%. But in terms of what you do with that knowledge, like, do you use that knowledge from a place of empathy, or do you use it from a place of arrogance? I feel like that's the role the Holy Spirit helps play. Because I really like what you said in terms of just how knowing yourself better will give you more empathy with others who, like you struggle with this. Well, for me, now that I've taken the Enneagram and become aware of the things that I struggle with, I now have more empathy towards you. Tell me this. So I agree 100%. The goal of the Enneagram is to know yourself better so that you can then hopefully take steps to change for the good, right? Is the goal of Enneagram, so you're a type 5, right?
Yes.
Is the goal of the Enneagram to change type, or is the goal of the Enneagram for you to maximize that type, to become the best 5? Like, what is the goal of the Enneagram in terms of type?
For sure, like, it's definitely to be able to maximize your full potential as your type, and to recognize, like, here's when I'm in a state where I'm unhealthy, and here are the steps that I need to take to become a healthier person. Because a lot of other personality assessments, like, they'll put you in a specific type, they'll explain your behavior, but it doesn't teach you why that behavior is occurring, and then how to come out of those unhealthy patterns, which is 100% the purpose of the Enneagram. It's to recognize, here is where I'm at, like assessing what type you are, where you're at, and how to reach a fuller potential. Especially in relationships with other people, for sure. Yeah,
gotcha. And let me backtrack a little. When I said you have to be a Christian in order to use the Enneagram correctly, I don't mean that if you're an unbeliever, the Enneagram is of no value. In no way is that what I'm saying. But I do think that, as a Christian, the Holy Spirit allows us, it brings us empathy where we maybe used to not have it. It makes us appreciate our brokenness. Like, the gospel helps us appreciate our brokenness in a way that nothing else can. So maybe just some clarification there, but maybe that leads into the next question. So those are a couple of reasons the Enneagram is useful and good. What are maybe two things, either that you've seen in students, in yourself, or whatnot? What are two things that young professionals, or two things that college students maybe need to be aware of in themselves, in the Enneagram, things that we need to watch out for in terms of the Enneagram?
Right. I could get really specific, but I kind of want to point out what you said about needing to be a Christian to use the Enneagram. One thing that I've discussed with my friends pretty in depth about the Enneagram is it's really interesting to see how the secular world has begun to use this tool as a form of, I guess, spiritual knowledge, spiritual awareness, and how it's almost becoming its own gospel in a sense. And how we have to be really careful as we're using it, not to use it as a replacement for the truth that comes from the Bible, but as a tool, I guess, to hold up against, like, or not against, but to hold with the scriptures to point out aspects of ourselves that we need to work on, but realize ultimately that ability to improve doesn't come from the Enneagram, it comes from Christ. Yeah. And I think just being aware of how it can become kind of a stumbling block for the secular world to be like, okay, well, I'm using the Enneagram, I'm becoming more self-aware, like, what is the need for the gospel? So I think that's definitely something to be aware of. And even as Christians, I think recognizing how much authority we give the Enneagram within our own lives, because we still need to recognize that ultimate authority does come from the truth that's found in God's word, whether or not you use the Enneagram to become more self-aware or, so I think just recognizing the amount of authority that we give it over our lives is just really, really important.
I don't even know. That's exactly right. I think that's so well said. I think kind of one thing that we've seen is the false gospel of older previous generations is this works-based theology of moralism, get your life right, get your life in order. And it's great to say those things, but without the gospel, there is no power in which to do those things. Right. What's interesting is the new false gospel is kind of this gospel of brokenness. We're all broken together. And it's good because that pendulum has swung this way to make us more empathetic, to make us more, maybe more others focused, more movement focused. But the problem with that is, just like you said, Anna, just because we have more awareness of the brokenness in our own lives, that by itself does not give us the power to necessarily do anything about it. That can only come from Christ. So I think that's exactly right. Please continue.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, not just being aware of our own brokenness or just explaining our brokenness, but realizing that with that awareness comes a responsibility, especially as Christians, to progress out of that and to move towards sanctification. Because I think it can be really easy to say, oh, well, I'm a type so-and-so, so that's why I am the way that I am. Or they're a type so-and-so, so that's, why they have this specific behavior that might not be a good thing. And another thing that I've seen too is where people will look at other types and say, oh, well, they have this behavior, and then use it as, or not use it, but they can end up resenting other types through the explanation of that behavior. I don't know if that makes sense. Just saying like, oh, well, I'm not going to get along with them because they have this specific behavior or they're this thing that they're working on. And that's just, to use this buzzword, that's toxic for me, right? The Enneagram isn't meant to just point out what behaviors or characteristics we have, or even who's more compatible with somebody else, because as Christians, like, we're called to love everybody. And just because we have an explanation of why people are the way that they are, I don't think gives us an excuse to say, okay, well, I'm more compatible with these types, so I will just gravitate towards them more. And if I find out that so-and-so is a type whatever, that's not an excuse to avoid relationship with them just because you realize certain character flaws that they may have that may not be as easy for you to work with. It's to bring awareness of, okay, so we have these areas where we don't mix well. So how can we work through those to create a better relationship? Yeah.
Fantastic. No, that's so helpful, Anna. Any kind of further resources, if people are curious, maybe, and I'm just throwing out ideas, but like books about the Enneagram, or where can we take the actual test, things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So for books about the Enneagram, there are a lot of them. But the one that I would recommend that's been the most helpful for me is called The Road Back to You, an Enneagram Journey to Self-Discovery.
Yep.
And it's by Ian Morgan, Cron. I'm probably going to pronounce these names wrong.
It's okay. I'm going to link it to Amazon, so don't worry.
Okay, there we go. And Suzanne Stabile. And I actually have the book. It looks like this. There you go.
Perfect.
And also, both of those authors have podcasts that I've benefited greatly from. Ian's podcast, Typology, and Susan's podcast, The Enneagram Journey. Also, Beth McCord, who's also known as the Enneagram Coach. I'm sure people who are avid Enneagram lovers have seen her stuff floating around on Instagram a lot. But she's known as the Enneagram Coach, and she has a website that's just yourenneagramcoach.com. She also has authored books for each of the individual types. So if you want to do a deep dive more into learning information about your specific type, I think that's a good way to go. Her website also has a free test, and it's been the most accurate that I think I've taken. Yeah, and just the easiest to navigate as well. And then she also has other courses that you can take if you want to go further into learning about it. Yeah, and then just one more kind of fun resource that I'm sure a lot of people have heard of at this point, but I don't know. Sleeping at Last is a musical artist. He's a singer-songwriter, and he actually has an album on Spotify called Atlas Enneagram, and he's taken each of the types and compose a song for them that kind of embodies their lived experience through the lyrics and through the music. So obviously as a musician, I am all about that.
Yeah.
But I remember when it first came out, I was like, oh, this song sounds like me. Like, yeah, it was just a really cool experience. So definitely check that out.
Awesome. No, these are all great. And we will be sure, just so everyone knows, on our podcast, we always have the description of the podcast, but then we have either on YouTube, you just click more. On the PVN Students page, click more, but we always have a further resources tab. So be sure you check that out. We'll link all these in the further resources tab. Anna, this was so helpful. Thank you so much for being with us today.
All right. Thank you.
For more information on this topic, message us on Instagram at PVN College. Listen to the PVN College podcast through Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Watch this podcast on Instagram TV at PVN College or on our YouTube page, Pleasant Valley North. We love you guys, and we'll see you next time.